My name is Hannah Mercer. I'm 32 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life begins to split down the middle is that it almost never announces itself like a tragedy. There's no music swelling in the background, no glass shattering, no dramatic silence that makes everybody in the room freeze and realize all at once that something important just died. Sometimes it starts with one sentence. A sentence delivered so evenly, so casually, that for a few seconds your mind refuses to believe your ears were attached to the same body. 3 days before everything ended, I still thought I was going to marry a man named Ryan Calloway. Or maybe that's not exactly true. Maybe I thought I was going to marry the version of Ryan I had been defending in my head for months. Ryan and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. The wedding was set for mid-October, about 11 weeks away from the conversation that destroyed it. I'm a union electrician, have been since I was 19. I'm good at it too. Good enough that with overtime, I pull in around $92,000 a year, and I've been obsessive about saving ever since my dad died and left me with one piece of advice that never stopped echoing in my head. Nobody is coming to rescue you financially. Rescue yourself. So I did. By the time this story started, I had around $40,000 in savings. That number matters. Not just because of what I lost later, but because it represented years of saying no when it would have been easier to say yes. Extra shifts, packed lunches, old boots a little longer than I should have worn them, the kind of discipline that doesn't look glamorous but keeps your life standing when everything else starts shaking. Ryan worked as an office coordinator for a real estate brokerage. He made around $52,000 a year. He was organized, charming, polished in a way I never tried to be. In the beginning, I liked that about him. I liked that he could walk into a room and make people feel comfortable within minutes. He had a clean smile, soft voice, nice shirts, expensive taste disguised as just having standards. When we first got together, he was easy, funny, the kind of man who made even errands feel like dates. Somewhere around the engagement, though, something shifted. At first, I told myself it was stress. Everybody says wedding planning is stressful, right? People become versions of themselves they don't entirely mean to be. Temporary versions. Inflated versions. Versions you're supposed to forgive because there's a florist involved and too many opinions about napkins. It started small. Ryan wanted a cohesive color palette. Fine. Sage green and dusty rose. Whatever. Then he wanted specific fonts on the invitations because the serif choice would set the tone. Then it was the bridesmaid dresses. He found one exact designer, one exact shade, one exact cut, and each dress cost $280. His bridesmaids were expected to pay for them themselves. 2 of them quietly complained to me in separate conversations, like maybe I was the normal one in the relationship and could translate. I said almost nothing because I was trying to stay out of the groom lane of chaos. Then the seating chart became a design element. Then the table numbers had to be hand calligraphed. Then the napkins had to be a certain linen weight, which was information I did not know existed because I work with conduit and wire and breaker panels, not emotionally loaded fabric density. Apparently napkins have weight. Apparently the wrong weight cheapens the visual narrative. That phrase still makes me tired. I was paying for about 70% of the wedding. Ryan's parents contributed $8,000, which his mother mentioned often enough that it began to sound less like generosity and more like a hostage note. Ryan's practical contribution was mostly vision and planning, which in real-life terms meant curating beautiful ways to spend my money. According to his color-coded spreadsheet and inspiration boards, the total budget had quietly swollen to around $34,000. Of that, I was covering about $24,000. And to be fair, I agreed to it. That part matters. I wasn't being dragged blindfolded into financial ruin. I loved him. I wanted him to have the kind of day he'd imagined. I could afford it without emptying myself out completely. The spending bothered me less than the tone behind it, the way real people had started becoming obstacles if they didn't fit whatever image he was building in his head. My sister Claire saw it before I wanted to. Claire is my only sibling. When our dad died 6 years ago, she was the one holding on to me at the funeral, while our mother was too medicated to stand on her own. People talk about strength like it's loud, like it looks like speeches or fists or breaking down doors. Claire's strength was never like that. Hers was quieter, cleaner, the kind that makes coffee for everyone else before remembering to sit down herself. She had been trying to get pregnant for over 2 years with her husband Noah, 2 rounds of IVF, doctor appointments that never seemed to end. Hope so fragile it felt dangerous to say out loud. Every month carried its own small funeral. When she finally got pregnant, I cried harder than she did. At the time this happened, she was 7 months along, due in late November, carrying this hard-won little girl like a miracle she still didn't fully trust herself to believe in. Ryan knew all of that. He had sat through family dinners, heard the stories, watched Claire laugh through exhaustion and swelling ankles and years of pain finally turning into something hopeful. He knew what that pregnancy meant. That is part of why what he said hit the way it did. The Sunday it happened, we were at the kitchen table going over the photography timeline. The photographer had sent a draft with all those neat little blocks of the day mapped out by the minute: bridal party exits, cocktail hour candids, family portraits, golden hour couple shots, all of it. Ryan was scrolling through the document on his laptop, one hand resting against his cheek, the blue light from the screen making him look oddly cold. Then he stopped. He turned the screen toward me and said very calmly, "I've been thinking about the family photo groupings, and I want to run something by you." I said, "Okay." He pointed to the section labeled formal portraits. "I think for the immediate family shots," he said, "it would be better if Claire wasn't included." I stared at him. I genuinely did not understand the sentence the first time. "What do you mean?" I asked slowly. "If Claire wasn't included?" He let out a breath like he had rehearsed this, which later I realized he had in more ways than one. "I just mean for the formal portraits," he said. "Not the whole wedding. Obviously she can still come." I kept looking at him. He went on, softer now, using that careful voice people use when they think they are being reasonable and generous while saying something monstrous. "By then, she'll be 7 months pregnant. She's going to be very big, Hannah. I've spent months trying to make the visual aesthetic of this wedding feel elegant and balanced, and a giant pregnant belly in the center of the formal family shots is going to throw off the whole composition." For a second, I felt like the room tilted. Not dramatic movie tilted, just enough that I became aware of my own heartbeat in my ears. I said, "A giant pregnant belly." Ryan blinked, like I was getting caught on semantics. "You know what I mean," he said. "I even asked the photographer some questions about composition and symmetry. Certain proportions make group shots harder to balance." "With what?" I asked. "Pregnant women?" "With people whose body shape changes the structure of the photo," he said. And there it was. The impatience, the annoyance, the little crack in the polished mask. "It's not personal. It's just an aesthetic reality." I sat there for maybe 10 seconds, maybe less, maybe more. Long enough to know that if I spoke too fast, I was going to say something I couldn't unsay. So I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3. Then I looked at the man I was supposed to marry and said, "My sister went through 2 years of fertility treatments and 2 rounds of IVF to have this baby. She is going to be in every photo she wants to be in." Ryan closed his eyes for half a second like I was exhausting him. "I knew you were going to react emotionally," he said. "I'm not saying she can't be in any photos. I'm saying maybe the casual ones, the reception ones, the less structured." "If my sister can't be in the formal portraits," I said, my voice so quiet it surprised even me, "then there won't be formal portraits." He laughed. Not because it was funny, because he thought I was bluffing. It was the kind of laugh people use when they want to pat your head and wait for you to calm down. That laugh lasted about 3 seconds. Then he saw my face, and something in his expression shifted. What followed was 4 hours of the ugliest argument we had ever had. He tried logic first. "It's just photos. Claire will understand." Then compromise. "She can be in some of them, just not the main ones." Then guilt. "I have spent 8 months planning this, and you are really going to blow everything up over a photo arrangement?" Then tears. Then silence. Then that final manipulative softness people reach for when nothing else works. "Let's sleep on it," he said. I slept on the couch. Not because he asked me to, because I didn't want him next to me in the dark, whispering revisions of cruelty and calling them compromise. I barely slept. I kept seeing Claire at family dinners, with one hand absent-mindedly resting on her stomach. Kept hearing Ryan say giant pregnant belly, like he was describing a stain on a tablecloth instead of my sister carrying the child she had bled and prayed and waited for. The next morning before work, I called Claire. I didn't tell her what he'd said. Not yet. I just wanted to hear her voice. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless and cheerful, and told me the baby had been kicking all night like she was training for a gymnastics scholarship before birth. Then she laughed and said she'd found the prettiest dress to wear to my wedding. I closed my eyes so hard it hurt. I told her that sounded perfect. Then I went to work and pulled wire for 8 hours with my jaw clenched so tight, I ended the day with a headache behind my left eye. And the entire time, one thought kept settling deeper and deeper into place. By the time I got home that evening, I was calm. Completely calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come before forgiveness. The kind that comes before a door closes. I found Ryan in the kitchen. He looked up like he expected another round of negotiation. I sat down across from him and said, I'm canceling the wedding. Not postponing. Not reconsidering. Canceling. 8 days later, I understood why so many people thought I went straight to nuclear. From the outside, it probably looked like I detonated a 3-year relationship over one sentence about wedding photos. I get that. But what people didn't see, what I hadn't fully let myself see until that moment, was that the photo conversation wasn't the problem. It was the last piece of evidence, the final undeniable proof in a pattern I had been quietly stepping around for months. When I told Ryan I was canceling the wedding, he didn't believe me. Not at first. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, that same controlled expression settling back over his face like a mask snapping into place. Okay, he said. She can be in the photos. Fine, let's move on. Just like that. Like the entire argument could be erased with one sentence. Like I was a switch he could flip back into place. I shook my head. It's not about the photos anymore. He frowned. Then what is it about? It's about who you are, I said, and what you think is acceptable. Something in his eyes hardened. You're being dramatic, he said. You're throwing everything away over something that could have been resolved in 5 minutes. No, I said quietly. You're trying to reduce it to something small, so you don't have to look at what it actually is. And for a second, just a second, I saw it. Not confusion, not regret. Annoyance, like I had made things inconvenient. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to fix. The calls started within hours. Ryan had gone into the bedroom after our conversation, closed the door, and I heard his voice through the wall, low, urgent, controlled. By the time I was halfway through canceling our photographer, his mother was calling me. I don't know what my son said to upset you, she began, her tone already positioned halfway between concern and correction. But you need to understand that wedding stress makes people say things they don't mean. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and told her exactly what he said. Word for word, about Claire, about the aesthetic, about the composition. There was a pause on the other end. Not shock, not outrage. A pause. Then she said carefully, well, there are ways to handle those kinds of situations. You could always do separate groupings. And just like that, something clicked into place. That was where it came from. Not stress, not pressure. This wasn't a sudden shift in Ryan. It was a language he had learned long before I met him. I took a breath. The wedding is off, I said. I'm handling the cancellations. Her tone sharpened. You're throwing away a 3-year relationship over a tantrum. I felt something cold settle in my chest. The tantrum, I said, was asking a woman who fought through infertility and IVF to hide herself so your son's Pinterest board could look balanced. She hung up on me. Over the next 48 hours, I made the calls. The venue kept the deposit, $5,000, gone. The photographer surprised me. She had a 60-day clause, but when I explained everything, she refunded half as a courtesy. I still lost about $1,200. The caterer kept $2,800. The florist kept $1,500. The DJ refunded everything. We hadn't signed the final contract yet. Total money I lit on fire? About $10,500. I'm not going to pretend that didn't hurt. That's months of overtime, early mornings, late nights, saying no to things that would have been easier to say yes to. But you know what hurt more? The thought of standing at an altar, promising my life to someone who looked at my sister and saw a problem to be managed. Ryan changed after that first day. At first, he went quiet. Not angry quiet, not explosive quiet. Just absent. He moved through the apartment like he was already halfway gone, barely speaking, barely reacting. For almost 24 hours, I think it actually hit him that I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't a negotiation tactic, that I was really doing it. Then the strategy shifted. He went to his father. His dad called me the next afternoon. Can we talk? He asked. Just the two of us? I said yes. He came over that evening, and we sat on the porch. The late summer air felt too warm, too still, like the world hadn't gotten the memo that everything had shifted. He didn't waste time. I don't agree with what Ryan said, he told me. Not about your sister. That was wrong. I nodded, saying nothing. But, he continued gently, this is a big decision, a permanent one. I'm asking you to consider counseling before you make it final. There was no manipulation in his voice. No pressure. Just sincerity. I respected that. I really did. But I also knew. I've already made the decision, I said. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. I figured you had. We sat there in silence for a while. Then he stood up, shook my hand, and said, for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. He was the only person in that family who treated me like an adult through the entire thing. I'll always remember that. Ryan, however, wasn't done. 5 days after I canceled everything, he started calling my family. My mom, my aunt, my cousin. Yes, the same cousin whose partner he had quietly tried to exclude from the wedding because she uses a wheelchair and, in his words, wouldn't match the visual flow of the ceremony. I hadn't even known about that part until after everything exploded. My cousin told me 2 days later. Just dropped it into conversation like it was obvious. Yeah, he asked me if maybe I could come solo, she said. Said it would simplify things. Simplify. That word stayed with me. People weren't people to him anymore. They were variables, and anything that complicated the picture got removed. When he called her after the cancellation, trying to paint me as unstable and impulsive, she shut it down immediately. You tried to uninvite my partner because she's in a wheelchair, she told him. I'm probably not your best character witness. Apparently, that ended the call pretty quickly. The call to my mom, though, that one hit differently. My mom is a peacemaker. Always has been. She called me that night, her voice soft and careful. Honey, she said, are you sure you're not overreacting? Weddings make people act a little out of character. I closed my eyes. I need you to do something for me, I said. What? I need you to imagine telling Claire that Ryan didn't want her in the wedding photos because of her pregnancy. There was a pause, a long one. Then my mom asked very quietly, he said that? Yes. Another pause. Then just one word. Oh. If you knew my mom, you'd understand. That oh wasn't confusion. It wasn't even surprise. It was a shift, a reclassification. Someone being moved from one mental category to another permanently. Then came the money conversation. Ryan's mother sent me an itemized list. Their $8,000 contribution. His suit. Accessories. Miscellaneous expenses. Total, around $11,500. She wanted me to reimburse all of it. I'll be honest, I considered it. Not because I thought I owed it, but because I hate loose ends. I hate conflict that lingers. So I called a friend of mine who works as a paralegal and asked what the situation looked like legally. He didn't hesitate. Most of that is considered a gift, he said, especially if there's no written agreement. You're not obligated to reimburse contributions to a wedding that didn't happen. What about the $8,000? I asked. If it went directly to the venue, he said, then it's gone to the venue, not you. That made things clearer. Not easier, but clearer. So I wrote her a detailed email. Polite, direct, no emotion. I explained exactly where the money had gone, that the venue had kept it under their cancellation policy, that I had personally lost over $10,000 in the same process, that I was sorry for the loss, but I wasn't reimbursing money I never received. She responded by forwarding that email to her entire extended family. Subject line, this is who she really is. I stared at it for a full minute when it hit my inbox. Then I closed my laptop. Because at that point, there was nothing left to argue. They could have their version of me. I had mine. And while all of this was happening, while the calls and the accusations and the financial fallout were still echoing, there was something else sitting quietly in my apartment. Something I hadn't seen yet. Something that would take every last piece of doubt I still had. And erase it completely. 13 days after I canceled the wedding, the apartment felt different. Not quieter. Quieter would have been peaceful. This was something else. The kind of silence that doesn't settle, it lingers, like it's waiting for something to be acknowledged before it lets you move on. Ryan had moved out about a week earlier, packed his clothes, his shoes, his carefully curated collection of neutral-toned everything, and left for his parents' house without much ceremony. No big goodbye. No last attempt to fix things. Just a strange, hollow absence where a person used to be. I told myself I was fine with that. And maybe I was. But the second bedroom, the one he had turned into his wedding planning headquarters, that room still felt like him. Binders stacked in neat rows. Fabric swatches clipped together like samples from a life that almost happened. A corkboard covered in pinned photos, color palettes, magazine cutouts of smiling couples who all looked like they had been filtered into perfection. It didn't look like a room meant for a marriage. It looked like a production set. I stood in the doorway for a long time before I finally stepped inside. I told myself I was just going to clean it out, pack things into boxes, make space. That's all. But the longer I stayed in that room, the more it felt like I was dismantling something bigger than decorations. I started with the corkboard, pulled out the pins one by one, took down the photos, folded the color palette sheets, sage green, dusty rose, everything so carefully chosen, everything so controlled. I moved to the desk next, opened drawers, stacked papers, sorted through envelopes, and then a folder slipped. It hit the floor, split open, and a scatter of printed pages slid out across the hardwood like something that had been waiting to be found. I crouched down, more out of reflex than curiosity. At first, I thought they were invoices, contracts, vendor details. But then I saw the header, email thread, the photographer's name. I froze. For a second, I just stared at them. I knew I shouldn't read them. I knew that. But they were already there, printed, in my apartment, on my floor. And something in my chest tightened in a way that felt less like hesitation and more like recognition. So I picked one up. The first email was from 3 months before the night at the kitchen table. 3 months. Ryan had written to the photographer asking about strategies for minimizing certain body types and group compositions. I felt my stomach drop. I kept reading. The photographer responded professionally. Polite, clear. She said she worked with all body types, that her style focused on natural presentation rather than heavy editing, and that she could suggest poses that flatter everyone. Normal, reasonable, human. Then Ryan wrote back, I'm specifically concerned about a family member who will be heavily pregnant, he said. Is there a way to pose the group so she's less prominent? Maybe behind someone or toward the edge. I need the photos to align with my vision board. My hands went cold. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I turned the page. The photographer responded again. Still professional. Still kind. She said she could guide positioning, but she would not intentionally hide or diminish a guest. She added that pregnant women often look beautiful in formal portraits. Beautiful. She used that word. And for a second, I had this strange, almost painful appreciation for a woman I barely knew. Then I turned to the last email, the one that had been sent about a month before Ryan ever brought it up to me. I've decided to talk to my fiancé about excluding her from the formal shots entirely, he wrote. If she agrees, I'll update the timeline. If not, I may need to rethink the photography package because I can't have images that don't match the aesthetic I'm paying for. I sat back on my heels. The room felt smaller, like the air had shifted. He had already decided. A month before, he ever sat across from me and said it like it was a passing thought. A casual concern. A reasonable suggestion. He had planned it, strategized it. Tested it with the photographer first, and when she wouldn't go along with it, he brought it to me. That wasn't stress. That wasn't a bad moment. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was intention. 3 months of it. 3 months of trying to find a way to make my sister smaller, less visible, less present, less real. I didn't realize I was crying until one of the tears hit the paper and blurred the ink slightly. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, took a shaky breath, and read through the emails again. Slower this time, just to make sure. Just to confirm that I hadn't misunderstood something. I hadn't. Every word was exactly as deliberate as it felt. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and took pictures of every page. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I needed proof, not for anyone else. For me. For that small, stubborn part of my brain that still wanted to believe maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I had misread him. Maybe... Number. There was no maybe left. I gathered the pages, slid them back into the folder, and found an old manila envelope in the closet. I sealed them inside and placed it in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I didn't show them to anyone. I didn't send them. I didn't even talk about them. But knowing they existed gave me something I hadn't fully had before. Peace. Not the soft kind. Not the kind that feels warm. The kind that feels final. Like a door closing with a lock that doesn't need to be checked twice. For a few days after that, things were quiet. Too quiet. I went to work. Came home, ate whatever was easiest, slept when I could. And then, about a week after Ryan moved out, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something in my gut told me not to. So I opened it. The message was long. Too long for a text. Too carefully structured to be impulsive. And I knew it was him before I even finished the first paragraph. He said he had been thinking, reflecting, that the photo situation had been poorly worded, that he hadn't meant it the way it came out. That I had taken one conversation and turned it into the destruction of both our lives. He talked about humiliation, about having to explain to his coworkers why the wedding was off, about the money, his suit, the bridesmaids' dresses, the inconvenience. And then, he said the thing that made my chest go completely still. Claire doesn't even know what I said, he wrote. You could have just included her in the photos and never told her. None of this would have happened. You chose destruction over compromise. I stared at that sentence. Read it again, and again. You could have just lied. You could have just hidden it. You could have protected the illusion instead of the truth. That's what he meant. That's what he valued. Not Claire. Not me. Not the reality of what he had done. Just the image. My hands were shaking when I locked my phone. He was right about one thing. Claire didn't know. Not yet. I had protected her from it, because I thought that was the kinder choice. But sitting there, with that message still burning behind my eyes, I realized something. Silence wasn't kindness. Not this time. Not about this. So the next morning, I got in my car and drove to my sister's house. Claire opened the door with one hand on her lower back and the other still holding a half-folded baby onesie. She smiled when she saw me. Not a polite smile, a real one. The kind that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth. "Hey," she said, "you didn't text. Everything okay?" For a second, I almost lied. Said yes. Said I was just in the neighborhood. Said I came to drop something off. Anything that would let me turn around and walk away without breaking something that still felt fragile. But then I remembered the message. You could have just never told her. And I knew I couldn't be that version of myself. "Can I come in?" I asked. She nodded immediately. Of course. Her house smelled like laundry detergent and something warm. Vanilla, maybe. The kind of smell that makes a place feel lived in, safe. I followed her into the kitchen and sat at the table while she lowered herself carefully into the chair across from me. "You're scaring me a little," she said, half joking. "What's going on?" I didn't ease into it. I didn't know how to. So I told her everything. The kitchen table conversation with Ryan. The way he said it. The word aesthetic. The argument. The cancellation. The money. And then the emails. I told her about the emails. Every word I could remember. I didn't show them to her. I didn't need to. By the time I finished, the room felt very still. Claire didn't cry right away. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the table like she was trying to piece together something invisible. A full minute passed, maybe more. Then she looked up at me. "You canceled your entire wedding because of me?" Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even really sad yet. It was confused, like she was trying to understand the math of it. I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "I canceled my wedding because of who he is. You were just the moment I couldn't ignore it anymore." That's when her face broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something inside her gave way all at once. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she pressed her lips together, trying to hold it in and failing anyway. "I don't want to be the reason," she started. "You're not," I cut in immediately. "You're the reason I saw it clearly." That did it. We both lost it. Full, ugly crying. At a kitchen table on a Thursday morning. The kind where your chest hurts and your nose runs, and you don't even try to hide it because there's no one to perform for. At some point, Noah walked in, took one look at both of us, paused, and then slowly backed out of the room like a man who understood survival instincts on a very deep level. Smart man. We laughed a little through the tears after that, not because anything was funny, but because sometimes your body needs somewhere to put all that emotion, and laughter is the only place left. After that day, everything shifted, not all at once. But steadily. I told my mom the full story, not just the conversation, the emails. I showed them to her. She read every page carefully, her brow tightening more with each line. When she finished, she placed them back on the table, looked at me, and said, "I hope you never speak to that man again." If you knew my mother, you'd understand how final that was. She spent her whole life smoothing things over, finding middle ground, keeping peace even when it cost her something. So for her to say that, it wasn't anger. It was judgment. And it was permanent. Word spread the way it always does in families. Quietly. Quickly. My cousin found out. The same one whose partner Ryan had tried to exclude. Between her story and mine, the pattern became impossible to ignore. People started connecting dots, seeing things they hadn't wanted to see before. Ryan's family, though? They told a different story. Of course they did. His mother continued telling anyone who would listen that I had humiliated her son, that I had overreacted, that I had destroyed something beautiful over one misunderstanding. His sister posted something vague online about men being punished for expressing themselves and women weaponizing emotion. I didn't respond. I didn't engage. Because at that point, I didn't need them to understand. I had what I needed. The truth. My sister. My peace. The financial damage was real. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. I lost about $10,500 in non-refundable deposits. I spent another couple hundred on legal advice just to be sure I wasn't going to be dragged into something worse. My savings took a hit. I picked up extra overtime shifts for a while. Came home exhausted. Ate standing up sometimes. But I knew I'd recover. Money always comes back. Time does its job. Effort adds up. I'll be fine. Ryan's side lost money too. His suit, the bridesmaids' dresses. His family's $8,000 to the venue. That part, I won't lie. It weighed on me. Especially his dad. He didn't deserve that. He was the only one who treated me with respect from start to finish. And still, every time I started to feel guilty, I thought about the emails. 3 months? 3 months of planning how to make my sister smaller, less visible, less included. 3 months of trying to convince a professional photographer to help erase a pregnant woman from a family portrait. 3 months of intention. That's not stress. That's character. Claire had the baby 3 weeks later. A girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Perfect. Loud. Strong. I was at the hospital for 13 hours. Sat in that uncomfortable chair. Drank terrible coffee. Watched the clock like it was personally responsible for how slow time was moving. And when they finally let me in, I held her. Within the first hour of her life, she wrapped her tiny hand around my finger with a grip that felt impossible for something so small. And in that moment, I thought about everything. About the wedding that didn't happen. About the money that was gone. About the man who thought this child, this tiny, fierce, already fighting little person, was something that needed to be hidden for the sake of a photograph. And I felt something settle inside me. Not anger. Not anymore. Something quieter. Something stronger. Certainty. I sleep better now. The apartment feels too big sometimes. Too quiet. I'm thinking about downsizing when the lease is up. Starting fresh somewhere that doesn't have memories built into the walls. I'm not dating. Not rushing into anything. Not trying to fix myself. There's nothing broken that needs rushing. I go to work. I come home. I visit my sister. I hold my niece. I exist in a life that feels not perfect, but honest. And that's enough. More than enough. Because at the end of all of this, I didn't lose everything. I lost $10,500. I lost a wedding. I lost a man who showed me exactly who he was. And in return, I kept my sister. I gained my niece. And I made sure that every single photo I take for the rest of my life will include the people who actually belong in it.